Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Elevate Voices. My name is Vanessa Codorniu, and this is a conversation series started by myself, Tatiana Delapiane, and Christine Gutierrez. Now, we started this series because we witnessed a lack of diversity in the wellness and spirituality communities. We decided it was time to change that. It is our deep intention to inspire dialogue and elevate diverse voices. We know that there are no quick and easy solutions, but this series is our attempt to create space for change. So welcome. Now today we have an amazing person. I love Lushanya Echeverria so much. So thank you and welcome, Lushanya, for being here. And we are so happy to have her. She is a professional educator. She is a life coach. She is a guide for so many. And I've met Lushanya maybe over 18, maybe 17, 18 years ago and have sat in her sweat lodges. And so it is with great honor, with great joy that I offer you Lushanya and I welcome you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yes, and we're all beyond grateful to have you as part of this conversation of elevating voices, discussing culture, spirituality, and diversity, and the lack of it. And really just heartfelt conversations on our experiences as healers, artists, change makers in this field of spirituality. And so as we begin today, Lushanya, I would love for you to share a little bit about your cultural background and how it has impacted the work that you're doing today.
For sure. So I'm a Lakota Sioux woman from the Oglala Sioux Nation of Standing Rock Sioux tribe. And I am one of the rare people who live off of the reservation, yet still practice my spiritual beliefs, the traditional spiritual beliefs. And I've been attending sweat lodge since I've been told 3 months old, and in a sweat lodge at least every month, probably most of my life. And so the ceremonies of my people are very rooted, are very in my skin, and the songs and the spirits and the ancestral connection just runs through my veins. And that is very rare, having lived off of the reservation for all of my life. And, having this gift, because these traditions really are a gift. This practice that I live with the spirits is truly a gift that guides every step of my life. And it has even led my life into the profession that I've chosen. I'm an educator because I live in a inner city area that has a lot of Native American people, and that's homeless people, and that there are halfway houses for Native people in my neighborhood, and you see sweat lodges, in the backyards and in these communities of the halfway houses. And so these are just this neighborhood, this area is my blood. And so I went into education because I saw the young ones. I saw the young children, and I was one of those young children, hanging out by the sweat lodge on a Saturday night or a Sunday night. And when I realized that being in education and being a formal educator, I could really maybe open a door for a child that perhaps if they didn't have a Native American educator and a person in their lives who understood the traditional values, maybe I could make a difference for one person. Maybe just one kid I could make a difference for. And so I have continued in this same area, the same neighborhood. As long as I'm living in Phoenix, I am working with this particular population. I am very involved with our Native American parents, helping. A few years ago, we did parenting classes for our Native American parents. And what the topic that came up was the trauma from residential boarding schools and the impact that that has on their children. Because I was seeing a lot of attendance issues, a lot of academic achievement scores were very low for our students. They were spending a lot of time out of class. They were being kicked out of class, and a lot of suspensions happening for these kiddos. And we finally did we ran the data to see if if Native American students were being singled out and having more, showing up more on the radar than other students and of other ethnicities, and they were. And so we did something about it. We wanted to address the issue with the parents and see what we could do to build bridges between home and the school, and what connections we could make for our students so that they found value in school. And what came out was that our parents did not feel safe with school, with the public education system. The parents had attitudes about public education that were being passed on to their children. And so hearing this, go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, I didn't want to interrupt, but I did want to ask you, for anybody who's watching and doesn't know, can you tell us a little bit about residential boarding?
Yeah.
Because maybe people watching don't know, and I don't know
Yes.
it's that key thing that will kind of bring it together.
So residential boarding schools were created in the late 1800s as by the colonists and by a particular gentleman, a general. And his motto for organizing residential boarding schools was to save the man, kill the Indian. So I know. So it was a strategy to assimilate Native people into white colonization culture, the colonizers' culture, and the schools were primarily white, staffed, and children were taken from their homes. Native American children were taken from their homes without parental consent. They were primarily, the students chosen were primarily children of leaders in tribes. And this was done so that the children did not receive the teachings and receive the same characteristics as the adults, as their teachers. And so, it was probably also a punishment. And so the children were taken and they were immediately stripped of any native garb that they had. They were stripped of their clothing. Their hair was cut. Literally, they were taken to a blackboard that had colonizer names, white colonizing names, and they selected a name and were forced, into dorm style living and separated from their siblings. They were not taught education. They were not taught reading, math, and arithmetic. They were taught, the males were taught construction and, labor skills like, landscaping or something, but construction primarily. And the girls were taught cleaning, how to clean and how to cook. And so these children really were stripped of all of their cultural values. They were not allowed to speak their language, just like many, Latinas and, Latinos. They were not allowed to speak their language in school. And they were severely, in these schools, the practice was to beat the children, was to traumatize them, to create stress for them. And around 1950, a law was passed that allowed Native families the option of sending their children there or not. So it took, half a century before Native parents were given an option to say no. And so these boarding schools still continued through the 70s and mid 80s. But some of the regulations changed because of the exposure that the schools were getting, and they wanted to correct the wrongs. But these 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 schools, they separated the families, and so the parents no longer had child rearing practices, and so the children grew up not knowing how to connect, because they were not connected to their mother or to their father growing up, and so therefore their offspring, they also were not connected to their children. They just didn't have these skills any longer. Also, the child rearing practices that they did have were pretty abusive and harsh, and there was a lot of a lot of these schools were run by religious organizations, and so there were nuns and priests in authority. And a lot of the children, were visited by these nuns and priests during the nighttime. And there was a lot of sexual abuse. And so ultimately, the boarding schools created a lot of stress and trauma. Children experienced trauma in these school and educational environments. And just it continued, the abuse and the trauma that happened continued within the family structure outside of these schools. And so the trauma and the creates attitudes and creates behaviors, and the pattern just continued through the generations. And it's so, the trauma, the acknowledgement and awareness of the trauma from the boarding schools is very prevalent right now. Almost any community that I go into, and if there are elders speaking, 95% of the time they are going to bring up the trauma that they experienced or that they know their grandparents experienced. So my dedication to being an educator right now is to find some way that we can empower our parents for their healing, and also bring more exposure of Native American culture to within curriculum, so that our students are still not stereotyped as living in teepees and wearing feathers and leather and buckskin, because that really is the stereotype of what Native people are. It is changing. Fortunately, it is changing. And there's a lot more, thanks to social media, there's a lot more reality. There are a lot more facts about what being Native means. But that's why I do the work I do, is to have some kind of effect, so that our generations and one or two more generations down the road are not, they feel seen. They feel seen at school, and they feel valued and not talked about as history.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lushanya, for sharing that and for bringing so much light and for the sacred work that you do. You were saying that you started these parenting classes. What has been the reaction in the communities? that you've been, because trauma was created. So how do we heal it? How do we undo it?
There is a lot of respect for healing work among Native communities, and the having parents, having Native American parents talk about the trauma that they experienced and being able to tell their story, because we are many Native cultures are very oral based. They share orally, and so just them being able to tell their story about the abuse that they experienced and that they endured in a context of sharing, not for the sake of being a victim, yet for the sake of telling a story and telling their part of history, of how they fit in history. That for the past 200 years they weren't erased, that they really were still here. And so that's very healing in itself for many of the people that I interact with. And it's really wonderful that children get to see their parents and their grandparents and their aunties and their uncles share their childhood experience in a proactive way, and not in a defensive or angry way. They're doing it in a very loving way. And that's been my experience, and I really look forward to, as I continue to develop this work, I really look forward to the stories that people get to tell, and then the stories that the children are going to tell.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I feel you. The more that we can just, express our voice, our stories, there's healing there. We all want to be seen and heard. And I'm just so grateful that we're having this conversation with you, because it's not every day that we meet a Native American here in New York. I don't know anyone. So I'm like, wow, just hearing you, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Just hearing your story and the work that you are doing is so powerful. And I'm curious, and I, like you were just saying about the healing and getting together. I'm like, wow, how can we heal this community? You know what I mean? What can we do to hear all these people's stories, because everything that's out in the media is bullshit, this is real right now, right here with you sharing this is real talk.
For sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I want to know personally, how do you give yourself the self-care doing this immense work? Because it's you have to be very strong, right, to do this kind of work. So how do you take care of yourself in doing this work for your people and for others, from other tribes or nations or sure groups of people? Because I know you work with Hispanics also.
And so the self-care first and foremost comes from the medicine of the people, the sage, smudging with the sage, and smudging with cedar, making sure we're using the sage to rid ourselves of negative energy, but also the balance of the cedar of bringing in the positive energy, really creating a balance with the medicines. And that's my daily practice, is getting up in the morning and smudging and praying and praying in gratitude. I think that's the one thing that I've learned as I've gotten a little bit older is, the prayers on the knees, from the knees, that's pretty traumatic. That's pretty hard. And there's a lot of suffering in that prayer. And I think I just got to a place where I realized I don't want to suffer in my prayers anymore. And so I'm going to make it a point to every day I'm going to pray gratitude. for gratitude that I want to be alive. Because how many people don't want to be alive? So I want to be alive. And yes, there have been times when I have not wanted to be alive. And I'm so grateful that I want to be alive. And so that's always the first prayer of gratitude, is thank you for giving me a life and giving me a path that I want to walk. And, you know, praying gratitude for the many, many blessings that we have. And, you know, praying for all of the lessons that come from the struggles and the challenges and the obstacles, and praying, you know, giving gratitude for that strength. Because we are some powerful chicks. You know,
Yeah.
and so, you know, that's a lot of the self-care, and also having that circle of women, having the circle of women that you can call anytime. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. Having that circle, that tight circle, is critical in surviving what we have to breathe in every day. Yeah. And what we absorb every day. And sweat lodges help too.
Yeah, you're so lucky. I haven't been to one yet, so I need to go on ASAP. Oh, I love that. Oh God, that would be such an amazing experience. And also, I wanted to ask you, because when you were talking about the boarding schools and all that stuff, and the separation of the children from their parents, it reminds me of like what's going on now. It's happening now. You know? And not just with you know, Hispanic families. This has been happening. This used to happen even during, you know, slave trade and all those things. Like, this country has separated families. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. And it's going on today.
Yes.
That's a problem.
It is a problem. It's
messed up. It's truly messed up. I think it's the most inhumane thing. Separate a child from its mother. Like, you have no right.
And it's an illness. It's an illness of this country. And it's an illness of the patriarchy that continually says in almost every community I step into that women are responsible for men's weakness. And that is another thought, that is another belief that just has to be deleted, that just has to be erased. I mean, if we're going to erase anything, let's erase that thought that women's power is a blame for brokenness.
Yes.
And I mean, we are turning a corner in our communities in those beliefs. But it's very slow. You know, I was even at a ceremony last week where I heard the leader say, you know, women, you should have worn longer skirts because you're going to tempt the men into sexual thoughts, and this is not, you know, this is a ceremony and we need to protect our men from having those thoughts. And I just thought, oh my gosh, like, okay, but okay. I mean, I know we're still here. I know that's still there. And how do we heal that? Healing our, you know, and we have to heal, we have to help our men heal. With Native men, we, you know, and you know, and when I say Native, I just don't mean, I mean all of the Americas. You know, it's we're talking about North America, Canada, Central America, South America. You know, everybody's been colonized, but you know, our men, you know, traditionally understood the matriarchal structure. They understood that all things, ideas and proposals and solutions were taken to the grandmothers first, you know, or last. They were, you know, as they were brainstormed, they were taken to the grandmothers for final consent. And then when the colonists came, they stripped women of that authority, and they told men that you're supposed to do this. And they demonstrate our men did not know how to do this. Our men did not know how to talk how to disrespect their grandmothers or their mothers. And so the way that they were taught was with this brutality and violence. And that's what our men have continued to do. They've thought that was the way they had to gain their power, that they had to get power for their communities, for their tribes. I mean, let's assume positive intent that our men have always just wanted to protect the women. I mean, look at the Maori, when they do their, what's it called? The haka? Mm-hmm. When they do their, when the Maori men do their haka, it is those Maori women feel very protected because those men are fierce. Those men are fierce. Nothing is getting through them. And that is all for their people. That is all for their women. They bring in the physical, but the women bring in the spirit. That is an understanding. And so how are we going to get into the seeds of this land, enough seeds into this land that we stand on and that we live on? How are we going to get into the seeds of this land that women, that get to our government, that women have the wisdom. Women are the wisdom carriers. And how and have our men start to begin to embrace that. And I think a lot of them are.
They are.
I meet a lot of beautiful men, and unfortunately some of our older leaders are still stuck in these ways. I feel like I just went off on a tangent.
No, but it's so good. It's so good. And we're both like sitting here like, sisters with you.
Wow. That was all spirit. So, a lot of men are coming around too. The wheel is turning. They're believing, but some of our older generations are still confused, and still there's a dissonance for them around what they've been taught and what they believe. But I believe that dissonance has always been there for them. And so it's going to take some time, and women continually showing up, women continually stepping into their light, and having their sisters and their brothers hold them through the darkness, through the shadows.
Yes.
Really bringing that balance from ourselves.
Thank you. And it's at the core of what I believe in. As we've talked about, everyone has been colonized. And I just remember from a young age of noticing, women not trusting each other. Women not trusting each other. And you trace that back to the Old Testament. You trace that back, Eve's going to be punished now with pain and childhood. And then centuries later, women who are medicine keepers and healers and know what herb to use to soothe birth are going to be killed and tortured it's happened throughout history. And so one of the ways that I've been able to hold space is for myself is to hold space in circle. Right. So I think as maybe anybody who's watching who doesn't know about this, yes, positive sisters who talk to you about what the next handbag sale, that's great. And when the next shoe sale, also sisters, those things are good. They all work, who does great hair. At the same time, too, the sisters that are going to hold space for you when you feel that core wound of betrayal. From your man, from yourself, from society. We've been taught to betray ourselves because we've been disconnected from who we are and the power that we have. So all of the things that you're saying just, is filling me with all this energy. And I think this is part of the reason that we gather, Tatiana and Christine, because we're like, let's hold the space to hear these voices. And so, I think each one teach one, And I think finding the courage within ourselves, if we can't find that within ourselves, even the I am hurting or I don't know. I don't know. We've been taught in this society, in this white culture, to know. We have to know intellectually. We don't. Our bodies tell us that we're in pain. Our spirit tells us we're in pain. And in this Uber movement, tech, crazy, gotta do it culture, and I'm a go getter girl, but woman, but at the same time, the solitude to drop into our bodies and our spirit, and having the patience and the kindness to listen to ourselves, because that's missing. And then when we can do that for ourselves, then we're going to be able to do it for our sisters and our brothers, because we don't have enough inside. I get short when I don't have time for myself, with those I love. So yeah, thank you. And we are turning a corner. Tatiana and I were talking about how I've been working with men more, and who bring them? The women. The women bring them. The mothers bring their sons. Women bring their children. Women bring their husbands. Cousins recommending. And I think men have realized it doesn't work. It's not working.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I really do feel like, we, like out there, we see a lot of things that are more for women, like the divine feminine, women's empowerment, and all that stuff. And I think that now it's time for men, because they, men is totally different than, patriarchal society. I feel like a lot of people like to place them together, like the divine masculine is different from a patriarchal society, And so men now are awakening. They want support. They want help. Now they're craving for more connection and intimacy, and to learn more of spirituality. I did a workshop, I think it was like 3 months ago, and I was really surprised that I almost had more, like half more men than women. Usually I work primarily with women. So when I do an event, it's mostly women. And this event, it was maybe 60% more men, and I was really surprised. Mm-hmm. And then I started thinking, like, whoa, I should open up my practice and work with men. And I did, and it was amazing and wonderful, so conscious and spiritual and beautiful. And now I'm just like, this is what Goddess wants for me. Mm-hmm. Goddess wants me to work with men now, and I'm just following her. I'm just like, okay, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing your work. You guide me.
Yes.
And trusting that. And so that's what I'm doing now. I'm just doing her work, and now she wants me to work with men.
Yes. Yeah.
So, it's so great, Tatiana. I'm so excited for you. I love it. Yay. And Lushanya, as we begin to close on this conversation, because I know we could speak for hours, and there's so much to cover. It would be, what is something that you would offer or recommend or advise to those who are listening to the plight of the Native people and other minorities who've been separated, who are now in this releasing, healing, admitting trauma? Is there anything, I don't know, an organization that people could, and I know that you're a part of one, what can people do who didn't know about this and are watching this today, and saying, oh my God, this is horrible. How can I support this healing? Mm-hmm. That would be my first question. And
So I have two answers. One is to support Native women in education, contribute to scholarship funds, just, organizations that support women going to getting higher education. And my second recommendation would be to find communities of prayer, find communities of Native people who are praying, and contribute to the prayer. And don't try to change the structure of the community. Simply go as a real support, as a real contributor. I find a lot of non-Native people are very drawn to these ways. and are very supportive and offer many, many gifts. However, white privilege always shows up at some point when there's a comfortability, a comfort level. And this can destroy the essence of what communities offer. When somebody out of the culture comes in and wants to change things or make it better, I just recommend trusting, prayer is prayer, and that the people, the holders of that medicine, trust the holders of the medicine and simply show up. And yeah.
So beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And I think it's important to share that, because I found that in many traditions, and it's important to just listen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
just let's all sit down and listen, and like you said, pray. And so, Lushanya, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your message, your voice. You matter to us. We see you, we hear you, we appreciate you, and just grateful for you and your work. And I pray for you to continue to have this courage and strength and beauty and joy to continue walking this path and giving so much to so many. And for those of you watching, if you found this information useful, please share this video on www.elevatevoices.com. We're going to keep all these videos free. We're not going to charge at any time. And they're here to inspire, to create dialogue, and to share diverse voices. So thank you. Thank you everyone for watching. And thank you, Lushanya, for sharing so beautifully, openly. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your invitation.